Gordon was resting in the siding. Sometimes he thought, "It's really tiring to be such a large and splendid engine. One does have to keep up appearances so." Beep, 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 beep. "Hello, lazy bones," whistled Henry. "What cheek," spluttered Gordon. "That Henry is too big for his wheels. Fancy speaking to me like that. Me, who has never had an accident." "Are jammed whistles and burnt safety valves accidents?" asked Percy innocently. "No, indeed. High spirits. Might happen to any engine. But to come off the rails like Henry did, well, I ask you, is that right? Is it decent?" Then it was Henry's turn to take the express. Gordon watched him getting ready. "Be careful, Henry. You're not pulling the flying kipper now. Mind you keep on the rails today." Henry went off in a huff, and Gordon yawned and went to sleep. But not for long. "Wake up, Gordon," said his driver. "A special train's coming, and we're to pull it." "Is it coaches or freight cars?" "Cars," said his driver. "Cars," said Gordon. Gordon's fire was slow to start, so Edward had to push Gordon to the turntable to get him facing the right way. "I won't go! I won't go!" grumbled Gordon. "Don't be silly! Don't be silly!" puffed Edward. At last, Gordon was on the turntable. The movement had shaken his fire. It was now burning nicely and making steam. Gordon was cross and didn't care what he did. He waited till the table was halfway round. "I'll show them! I'll show them!" he hissed. He moved slowly forward to jam the table, but he couldn't stop himself and slithered into a ditch. "Whoosh!" he hissed. "Get me out! Get me out!" "Not a hope," said his driver and fireman. "You're stuck, you silly great engine. Don't you understand that?" They telephoned Sir Topham Hatt. "So Gordon didn't want to take the special train and ran into a ditch?" "What's that you say? The special's waiting? Tell Edward to take it, please, and Gordon, leave him where he is. We'll get him out later." On the other side of the ditch, some little boys were chattering. "Oh, doesn't he look silly? They'll never get him out." They began to sing. "Silly old Gordon fell in a ditch, fell in a ditch, fell in a ditch. Silly old Gordon fell in a ditch, all on a Monday morning." Gordon lay in the ditch all day. "Oh dear," he thought, "I shall never get out." But that evening they lifted Gordon and made a road of sleepers under his wheels to keep him from the mud. Strong ropes were fastened to his back end, and James and Henry, pulling hard, managed to bring him to safety. Late that night, Gordon crawled home, a sadder and wiser engine. One day, Thomas was at the junction when Gordon shuffled in with some freight cars. "Phew," remarked Thomas. "What a funny smell." "Can you smell a smell?" "I can't smell a smell," said Annie. "A funny, musty sort of smell," said Thomas.
"No one noticed it till you did," grunted Gordon. "It must be yours."
Not long ago, he had fallen into a dirty ditch. Thomas enjoyed teasing him about it. "Annie, Clarabelle, do you know what I think it is? It's ditch water." Before Gordon could answer, Thomas puffed away. Annie and Clarabelle could hardly believe their ears. "He's dreadfully rude. I feel quite ashamed. I feel quite ashamed. He's dreadfully rude." And to Thomas they said, "You mustn't be rude. You make us ashamed." But Thomas didn't care a bit. "That was funny. That was funny," he chuckled. He felt very pleased with himself. Annie and Clarabelle were deeply shocked. They had great respect for Gordon, the big engine. Thomas left the coaches at the station and went off to a mine for some cars. Long ago, miners digging for lead had made tunnels under the ground. Their roofs are strong enough to hold up cars, but not the weight of engines. A large notice warns them not to enter the area. "Danger! Engines must not pass this board." Silly old board, thought Thomas. He had often tried to pass it, but had never succeeded. But this morning he had made a plan. The fireman went to throw the switch. "Now for my plan," thought Thomas. Bumping the cars fiercely, he jerked his driver off the footplate and followed them into the siding. "Come back!" yelled his driver. "Fire and smoke," said Thomas. "I'm sunk." And he was. "Oh dear," he said, "I am a silly engine." "And a very naughty one, too. I saw you," said Sir Topham Hatt. "Please get me out. I won't do it again." "I'm not sure. We can't lift you out with a crane. The ground's not firm enough. Let me see. I wonder if Gordon could pull you out." "Yes, sir," said Thomas, but he didn't want to meet Gordon just yet. "Down a mine, is he?" laughed Gordon. "What a joke!" "Whoop, whoop, little Thomas. We'll have you out in a couple of puffs." Strong cables were fastened between the two engines. "Are you ready? Heave!" It was a lot harder than they all thought. At last, Thomas was free. "I'm sorry I was cheeky," said Thomas. "That's all right, Thomas. You made me laugh," replied Gordon. "I'm in disgrace." "So am I," said Thomas. "Why, so you are, Thomas. Shall we form an alliance? You help me and I'll help you." "Right you are," agreed Thomas. "Good. That's settled," rumbled Gordon. And buffer to buffer, the Allies puffed home. Gordon was cross. "Why should Henry have a new shape?" he grumbled. "A shape good enough for me is good enough for him. He goes gallivanting off, leaving us to do his work, and comes back saying how happy he feels. It's disgraceful. And there's another thing.
Henry whistles too much. No respectable engine ever whistles loudly at stations. It isn't wrong, but we just don't do it. Poor Henry didn't feel happy anymore. Never mind, whispered Percy. I'm glad you're home again. I like your whistling. Goodbye, Henry, called Gordon. We're glad to have you with us again, but remember what I said. Later, Henry stopped at Edward's station. Hello, Henry, said Edward. You look splendid. I was pleased to hear your happy whistle yesterday. Thank you, Edward, smiled Henry. Shh! Can you hear something? It sounds like Gordon, said Edward, and it ought to be Gordon. But Gordon never whistled like that. It was Gordon. He came rushing down the hill at a tremendous rate. He didn't look at Henry, and he didn't look at Edward. He screamed straight through the station and disappeared. Well, said Edward. It isn't wrong, chuckled Henry, but we just don't do it. And he told Edward what Gordon had said. Meanwhile, Gordon screeched along the line. The noise was awful. At the station, everyone covered their ears. Sir Topham Hatt covered his ears, too. Take him away, he bellowed, and stop that noise. Gordon puffed sadly away, but he wouldn't stop whistling until two fitters climbed up and knocked his whistle valve in place. That night, Gordon slunk into the shed. He was glad it was empty. It isn't wrong, murmured Henry to no one in particular, but we just don't do it. No one mentioned whistles. Next morning, Henry was enjoying himself enormously. I feel so well, I feel so well, he sang. Trickety-trock, hummed his coaches. Then he saw some boys on a bridge. Beep, beep, hello, he whistled. Oh, he called. The boys didn't wave and take his number. They thought it fun to drop stones on him instead. They've broken our glass! They've broken our glass! Cried the coaches. The passengers weren't hurt, but they were cross. Call the police! No, said the driver. Leave it to Henry and me. What will you do? They asked. Can you keep a secret? Yes, yes. Well then, said the driver, Henry is going to sneeze at those boys. Lots of people were waiting at the station just before the bridge. They wanted to see what would happen. Henry has plenty of ashes, said the driver. Please keep all windows shut till we've passed the bridge. Henry's as excited as we are, aren't you, old fellow? Henry felt more stuffed up than excited. Soon they could see the boys, and they all had stones. Are you ready, Henry? Said the driver. Sneeze hard when I tell you. Now, he said. Achoo! Well done, Henry, laughed his driver. Henry went home, hoping that next time he saw Gordon and the boys, they would have learned not to be so mean. It was an important day in the yard. Everyone was busy and excited, making notes and taking photographs. A special visitor had arrived and was now the center of attention. Who is that? Whispered Thomas to Duck. That, said Duck proudly, is a celebrity. A what? Asked Percy. A celebrity is a very famous engine, replied Duck. Driver says we can talk to him soon. Oh, said Thomas, he's probably too famous to even notice us. Just then, Gordon arrived. Puh, said Gordon. Who cares? A lot of fuss about nothing, if you ask me. and he steamed away. Later that night, the engines found that the visitor wasn't conceited at all. He enjoyed talking to the other engines till long after the stars came out. He left early next morning. Gordon was still complaining. "Good riddance," he grumbled, "chattering all night. Who is he anyway?" "Duck told you," replied Thomas. "He's famous." "As famous as me? Nonsense." "He's famouser than you. He went 100 miles an hour before you were even thought of." "Huh, so he says," huffed Gordon, "but I didn't like his looks." "He's got no dome. Never trust domeless engines. They're not respectable." "I never boast, but I'd say 100 miles an hour would be easy for me. Goodbye." Duck took some freight cars to Edward's station. "Hello," called Edward. "That famous engine came through this morning. He whistled to me. Wasn't he kind?" "He's the finest engine in the world," replied Duck. Then he told Edward what Gordon had said. "Take no notice," soothed Edward. "He's just jealous. He thinks no engine should be famous but him. Look, he's coming now." Gordon was running very fast. His wheels pounded the rails. "He did it, I'll do it. He did it, I'll do it." Gordon's train rocketed past and was gone. "He'll knock himself to bits," chuckled Duck. Gordon's driver eased him off. "Steady, Gordon. We aren't running a race." "We are, then," said Gordon, but he said it to himself. Suddenly, Gordon began to feel a little strange. "The top of my boiler seems funny," he thought. "It feels as if something is loose. I'd better go slower." But it was too late. On the viaduct, they met the wind. It was a teasing wind which blew suddenly in hard puffs. Gordon thought it wanted to push him off the bridge. "No, you don't," he said firmly. But the wind had other ideas. It curled round his boiler, crept under his loose dome, and lifted it off and away into the valley below. Gordon was most uncomfortable. The cold wind was whistling through the hole where his dome should be, and he felt silly without it. At the big station, the freight cars laughed at him. Gordon tried to wheesh them away, but they crowded round no matter what he did. On the way back to the shed, he wanted his driver to stop and fetch his dome. "We'll never find it now," said the driver. "You'll have to go to the works for a new one." Gordon was very cross. "I hope the shed is empty tonight," he huffed to himself. But all the engines were there waiting. "Never trust domeless engines," said a voice from somewhere behind him. "They aren't respectable." Thomas's branch line is important, and so is Edward's. But their track and bridges are not so strong as those on the main line. So Topham Hatt does not allow the heavier main line engines like Gordon to run on them. But one day, the way Gordon was talking, you would have thought Sir Topham Hatt had given this order for quite another reason. "It's not fair," grumbled Gordon. "What isn't fair?" asked Edward. "Letting branch line diesels pull main line trains." "Never mind, Gordon. I'm sure Boko will let you pull his freight cars sometimes." Gordon spluttered. "I won't pull Boko's dirty cars. I won't run on branch lines." "Why not? It would be a nice change." "Sir Topham Hatt would never approve," huffed Gordon. "Branch lines are vulgar." Gordon puffed away. Edward chuckled and followed him to the station. Every evening, the two engines pulled two fast trains from the station. Gordon always leaves first with an express for the main line. Edward follows 5 minutes later with his train for the branch line. Usually everything runs like clockwork, but tonight there was trouble. A lady in a green floppy hat was saying goodbye to a friend. It was nearly time for Gordon to start. The fireman looked back towards the conductor's van and saw something green waving. "Right away, mate!" He thought the conductor had waved his flag. Gordon started, leaving luggage, his passengers, and the conductor all standing on the platform. Everyone was very surprised and cross. To make matters worse, by the time Gordon had been stopped and brought back, Edward was already late with his train. So now he set off first. But the signalman at the junction wasn't told about the change. By mistake, he sent Edward along the main line. Gordon was sent along the branch and arrived cold and cross on one of the sidings near the harbor. Next morning, Bill and Ben peeped into the yard. There were no cars for them, but they didn't mind that. Teasing Gordon would be much better fun. "What's that?" asked Bill. "Shh!" whispered Ben. "It's Gordon." "It looks like Gordon, but it can't be. Gordon never comes on the branch lines. He thinks them vulgar." Gordon pretended he hadn't heard them. "If it isn't Gordon," said Ben, "it's just a pile of old iron, which we'd better take to the scrapyard." "No, Bill, this lot's useless for scrap. We'll take it to the harbor and dump it in the sea." Gordon was alarmed. "I am Gordon! Stop! Stop!" When Boko suddenly arrived, Gordon thought him the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. "Boko, my dear engine, save me!" Boko quickly sized up the situation and threatened to take away the cars he had brought for Bill and Ben. This made the twins behave at once. Gordon thought Boko was wonderful. "Those little demons, how do you do it?" "Ah, well," said Boko, "it's just a knack." Gordon still believes that Boko saved his life, but we know the twins were only teasing, don't we? One morning, Thomas was being cleaned when Gordon arrived. Mud had blown all over his smart blue paint. "Hello, Gordon," called Thomas. "You look as if you've had a mud bath. Be a sensible engine and have a shower instead." Gordon snorted. "I haven't time to dawdle over my appearance like fussy tank engines do." The wind blew stronger. "Gordon, slow down," called his driver. This made Gordon crosser still. "Now I'll be dirty and late, he hissed. At the next station was a sign. All trains must wash down daily. James had just finished being cleaned. "Come on, Gordon," said his driver. "You'll feel better, too, after a good hose down." "Bah!" said Gordon, and angrily let off steam. "You're a very naughty engine," said Gordon's driver. "Now James will need another shower. You'll have to wait your turn till later." "Good riddance," huffed Gordon. "I'm far too busy to waste time with water." He finished his journey safely and steamed into the big station. Sir Topham Hatt was waiting. So were Gordon's coaches and the passengers. "Goodness gracious," said Sir Topham Hatt. "You can't pull the train. Henry will have to do it. Gordon, you'd better get cleaned straight away." Gordon was soon being washed. "Mind my eyes," he grumbled. Then he pulled cars for the rest of the day. Freight trains, he spluttered. He felt his position deeply. That's for you, and you, and you. Cars will be cars, laughed James. They won't with me, snorted Gordon. I'll teach them. James got ready to take the express when Gordon returned. Be careful, warned Gordon. The hills are slippery. You may need help. I don't need help on hills, replied James huffily. Gordon thinks he knows everything. Earlier, a storm had swept Gordon's hill, blowing leaves onto the tracks, which made them slippery. Even though the storm had passed, the hill was still difficult to climb. James knew this. The signal showed clear, and James began to go faster. I'll do it, he puffed. Halfway up, he was not so sure. I must do it, but his wheels slipped on the leaves. He couldn't pull the train at all. Help, help, whistled James. His wheels were turning forward, but the heavy coaches pulled him backwards. The whole train started slipping down the hill. His driver shut off steam and put on the brakes. Then carefully he stopped the train. Gordon saw everything. Ah, well, we live and learn. Never mind, little James. I'm going to push behind. Clouds of smoke and steam billowed from the snorting engines as they struggled up the hill. We can do it, puffed James. We will do it, puffed Gordon. At last they reached the top. Beep, beep. Thank you. Goodbye, whistled James. Boop, boop, answered Gordon. Goodbye. That night, Sir Topham Hatt came to see the engines. Gordon was miserable. Please, sir, said Thomas, can Gordon pull coaches again now? If you understand that having a washdown is essential to every engine, then yes, Gordon, you may. Thank you, grunted Gordon. Dirty or clean, I'm a famous machine. But no one heard but him. One morning, Gordon was in the yard taking on a large supply of coal. That's the third load of coal you've had today, Gordon, said James. Some might say you're being rather greedy. I'm an important engine, replied Gordon. Important engines need plenty of coal, but I doubt if you would understand that, James. James snorted and went about his work. Later, Gordon was taking on water from a standpipe because the water tower was under repair. I wouldn't drink too much of that water if I were you, Gordon. It might give you boiler ache. Pah, said Gordon. What's this, educating Gordon Day? First James, now you, Duck. Big engines have big needs. Little engines are just annoying. Don't say I didn't warn you, laughed Duck. Later, Gordon steamed into the yard at the big station. That's what I need, exclaimed Gordon. There, emerging out of the sheds, were two shiny tenders. Now, if I had two tenders, said Gordon, I wouldn't need to stop so often, and I wouldn't have to listen to silly little engines. Those tenders belong to a visitor, replied his driver. Diesel sidled up alongside. Everyone knows that tenders are a mark of distinction, but I'm afraid that no amount of tenders will save you in the end. We Diesels are taking over, and we don't need tenders to make us important, not even one. Gordon was most upset. He was feeling just the same next day. I'm not happy. I know, said Duck. It's boiler ache. It's not boiler ache, protested Gordon. It's... Of course it is, interrupted Henry. That water's bad. Have a good washout. Then you'll feel a different engine. Your boiler must be full of sludge. Don't be vulgar, huffed Gordon. He backed down onto his train, hissing mournfully. Cheer up, Gordon, said Sir Topham Hatt. I can't, sir. Is it true what Diesel says, sir? What does he say? That Diesels are taking over. Don't worry, Gordon. That will never happen on my railway. One more thing, sir. Why did the visitor have 2 tenders? Because he lives on a railway with long distances between coaling depots. Gordon felt better. But Henry started complaining. He banged some cars angrily. I always work hard enough for 2, he puffed. I deserve another tender. Duck whispered something to Donald. He was going to play a trick on Henry. Henry, he asked, would you like my tenders? Yours? What have you got to do with tenders? All right, said Duck. The deal's off. Would you like them, Donald? I wouldn't deprive you of the honor, replied Donald. It is a great honor, continued Duck thoughtfully, but I'm only a tank engine. Perhaps James might. I'm sorry I was rude, said Henry hastily. How many tenders have you, and when could I have them? I have 6, and you can have them this evening. 6 lovely tenders, chortled Henry. What a splendid sight I'll be. Henry was excited all day. Do you think it will be all right? He asked for the umpteenth time. Of course, said Duck. They're all ready now. The other engines waited where they could each get a good view. But Henry wasn't a splendid sight at all. His 6 tenders were very old, dirty, and filled with boiler sludge. Had a good washout, Henry, called a voice. That's right. You'll feel a different engine now. Henry was not sure, but he thought the voice belonged to Gordon.
Early one morning, Gordon's fire would not light. I don't know what's wrong, sighed the firelighter. There must be gremlins about. What are gremlins? Asked Percy. I've heard that they're little green men who play tricks, replied Thomas. Can we find one? Pah, said James. Gremlins don't exist. They're just an excuse when things go wrong. If Firelighter says there are gremlins, there are. Ha, snorted James. Sir Topham Hatt had heard everything. Silence, he said. I am expecting a VIP, a very important person today. She has heard that all my engines are really useful. Please prove it. Yes, sir, they all said. As long as the gremlins let us. What gremlins? The ones in Gordon's fire, sir. That's why he's not ready yet. I'll see about that, thundered Sir Topham Hatt. And he did. Gordon, I expect you to be on your best behavior today. You are to pull the special coach for my special visitor. But no high speeds, please. She won't like that. Gordon was proud and pleased. He was waiting for his special coach when Percy puffed in with some freight cars. What's the matter, Gordon? You're late. Driver says there's gremlins in the turntable, replied Gordon. They must be everywhere, squeaked Percy. At last the turntable was mended, and Gordon puffed away with the special coach. He was soon working hard to make up for lost time. After he arrived at the station, Sir Topham Hatt became concerned. Where's Thomas? He wondered. He's supposed to be bringing my visitor from the docks. Huh, huffed Gordon. Thomas isn't really useful if he's late. But it wasn't long before Thomas arrived. I'm sorry. A cow strayed on the line and we had to wait for the farmer to take her away. But driver says your visitor is here safe and sound. Indeed she is, smiled Sir Topham Hatt. How nice to see you. Who is it? Whispered Percy. I don't know, replied Thomas. But Sir Topham Hatt is certainly keen to please her. He's arranged a special party for her. She's got a dog as well, said Percy. Come on, Thomas, said the driver. You need a drink. Pah, puffed Gordon. Thomas is just a lazy little engine. Sir Topham Hatt is expecting me to arrive on time. We're late because of Thomas. Gordon's driver decided to make up for lost time. Then there was trouble. I think we'd better slow down. This is an old line and could make things uncomfortable for the VIP. And it did. She was taking a bath and the water was slopping all over the place. "Oh!" she cried. Gordon was very relieved to reach his final destination, where Thomas was waiting to collect Sir Topham Hatt and his special visitor. He blew an extra long whistle. This frightened the visitor's dog so much that he fled from the station and ran into a field where a bull was grazing. The bull frightened the little dog even more. He ran back again, onto the platform and over the bridge. He didn't stop until he jumped straight into Thomas's cab. But he had a wonderful ride, all the way to the docks. "What's the dog's name?" asked the fireman. "Well, after today's events, I think I'll rename him Gremlin," Sir Topham Hatt chuckled. "In that case, I've met one at last. Ha ha!" "Excuse me, sir, but who is your very important visitor?" "Why, didn't I tell you? This lady is my mother, and she agrees with me. You are indeed really useful engines, and my mother, of course..." Gordon was feeling grumpy. This was making James cross. "Why are you complaining all the time?" "Because I'm a big blue engine and I know everything. I shall complain whenever I want. You're just a small red engine with ideas above your station." "I can't see any," said Percy. "Where are they?" "Any what?" "Ideas above the station. The sky's empty." "Like your smoke box, Percy," laughed James. But Gordon was still grumpy. "One day I'll show you just what a big engine can really do." "So what can a big engine really do?" "Not speak to silly little green engines for a start," replied Gordon. Then he puffed away. Later that day, Sir Topham Hatt came to see him. "Gordon, you'll be making one stop today with an empty express to test our new station. You can make up time afterwards." "Why can't Henry do it? He likes idling in stations." "You will do as you are told." So Gordon did. But he was still unhappy, and he grew sick too. "I just can't get up to speed," he moaned. "It's time for your visit to the works. Your pipes are clogged," said the fireman. At last they approached the new station. Gordon was impressed, but his mood soon changed. In front of him was a blank wall and huge buffers. "What a boring view! Important engines like me should have a panoramic view, where I can see people and people can see me!" And he wheezed angrily. Gordon was happy when it was time to leave. "Now you can really enjoy your run as long as your pipes will let you," said his driver. Come on! I can go faster than this," huffed Gordon. "Sick me never!" But Gordon began to feel more and more feeble, and soon he came to a complete stop. "What happened?" His driver and fireman inspected him. "Something's broken inside you, Gordon," said his fireman. "Now you really will have to go to the works." Gordon was still fuming when James arrived to collect his coaches. Well, so much for knowing about everything. You got too puffed up in your boiler, so it serves you right." When Gordon returned from the works a few days later, he was still boasting. "I am the finest engine on the island of Sodor. Probably the finest in the world." "Come on, Gordon. We're going to the official opening of the new station." Then there was trouble. As Gordon approached the new station, Neither the driver nor fireman could apply his brakes. Something had jammed. The driver reduced steam, but Gordon was still going too fast.
Help me, please.
Well, Gordon, said Sir Topham Hatt, I knew you wanted a panoramic view, but this is not the way to achieve it.
Yes, sir. Sorry, sir.
When Gordon was repaired again, he took Sir Topham Hatt to the new station for its second official opening. This time he arrived safely, and everyone clapped and cheered as he pulled in. Sir Topham Hatt spoke to him. Your panoramic view is here to stay. I trust you will always see through it from the safety of your own rails. Gordon heartily agreed.